Greetings, dear viewers of the Ruslan Belov channel. I present to your attention the daily overview of the situation on the front line of the Ukrainian conflict. Let me remind you that yesterday's material was dedicated to a detailed analysis of the November period events. I recommend familiarizing yourself with that episode for those who missed it. The content truly deserves attention. November demonstrated the best rates of advance, not only in comparison with the current year, but also became record-breaking since the days of June 2022. During this period, Russian presence was established over a territory of 760 square kilometers. Today's agenda concerns the current situation and forecast regarding the number of settlements that may come under Russian control during December, meaning until the end of the current year. It's worth noting that December has barely begun, and already 2 urban settlements have come under Russian administration. Let's proceed with a sequential analysis of the situation, starting with the Kharkiv region. Here we observe substantial development of events in Volchansk. More precisely, not just development, but a final resolution of the matter. Volchansk is now entirely under Russian control. Moreover, the most significant achievements came precisely in the last 48 hours. Initially, the day before yesterday, control was established over a number of streets, to be exact. Over 4. We're talking about Chaplievskaya, Zagorodnaya, Stanichnaya, and Chkalov streets. However, the key moment was the clearing operation of the forest area located between Chkalov and Chaplievskaya streets. It was in this forest zone that the AFU support positions were located, preventing Russian units from reaching the eastern border of the city, but these positions were eliminated. After this, only 2 streets and 3 small alleys remained under Ukrainian control. Yesterday, these sections were finally taken, and the city completely came under Russian jurisdiction. Besides resolving the Volchansk situation, active advancement of Russian forces is also observed south of this city. You remember my report that Russian servicemen entered the urban-type settlement of Vilcha. So in this direction, certain advancement occurred. Although on the map this may look insignificant, see this thin line of position improvement. But do you know how many households were cleared exactly? 72. I'll repeat, externally it seems the changes are minimal, but in reality 72 households were brought under control. Advancement of Russian forces is also recorded in Lyman. We're not talking about the city of Lyman, but about a village with that name. I recently informed you that fighters managed to penetrate the village and reliably consolidate there. Over the last 2 days, they were able to establish control over the industrial territory in the eastern sector of the settlement. Considering the current configuration of the front line, now an opportunity has appeared not only to complete the operation in Lyman, but also from these positions to penetrate the western part of Vilcha, which undoubtedly should contribute to accelerating the taking of the settlement under control. Well, if the Ukrainian forces lose an urban-type settlement, their defense rolls back immediately by 7 to 8 kilometers. And naturally, this portends nothing favorable for them. Let's continue the analysis of another city in the Kharkiv region, Kupansk. Here the situation is not so unambiguous and not so favorable. Combat clashes in the city don't cease. Regarding yesterday's statements by Zelensky that supposedly the entire city is already under their control and completely cleared, this doesn't reflect the actual state of affairs. Indeed, Ukrainian forces penetrated the Yubileyny micro-district and the private housing area near this micro-district. But this exhausts their achievements. That is, they entered one micro-district, yet claim to have taken the entire city. As for Russian troops, in the southeastern sector of the city, they also don't have full control, just as over Petropavlovka. At the same time, in recent days, attempts were made to enter there from the northern direction, but these attempts were not crowned with success. You know, I already partially touched on this topic in yesterday's episode, and I'll repeat that I don't experience particular optimism. All these stories about Ukrainian forces being blocked and everything about to collapse. This is, of course, calculated not for a military audience, but for a political one, for Trump, the Pentagon, and so on. Reality is significantly more complex. Yes, indeed, the Russian army controls certain sections with the help of drones, controls crossings, destroys these crossings and equipment. However, it's necessary to understand that establishing a complete blockade with drones is impossible. and the Ukrainian forces still have supply routes. Therefore, despite such a frontline configuration, a semi-bowl, semi-encirclement, nevertheless, Ukrainian forces have been in such a position for a month already, but nothing is collapsing for them. They're holding on to Petropavlovka, holding on to Kurilovka, Kovsharovka, Kupiansk Uzlovoy. Yes, here too you can observe, in this cauldron, or rather in this semi-cauldron, in this bowl, the Russian side is pushing a bit, improving positions a bit, but for now, at least regarding settlements, there's no progress. And here it's simply such a situation that on one side Zelensky, well, they entered the Yubileyny micro-district, and he declares that they recaptured the entire city, meaning significant exaggeration is taking place. Well, and from the Russian side, let's also be objective. There's also a certain exaggeration of the general situation present. Let's move further. The next city is Lyman. Here, naturally, by the end of the month, we won't take the city. There are no chances. It's still necessary to cut the main supply artery, the Slavyansk-Lyman road, plus take Drobyshevo, with which we have, to put it mildly, certain problems, plus complete the operation in Stavki. Yes, those very Stavki, which according to official reports are under Russian control. Well, and here on the map you can see it's displayed as full Russian control. Well, in reality there's no complete control. Here it's approximately 50-50. So there's still a lot of work ahead here. But where there really is a probability of the Russian army taking a city is further south. We're talking about Seversk. Yes, the chances for the Russian side aren't very high. In my list, I give 15% probability of taking the city before the end of the month, but still it's not zero. That is, chances are present. Here, everything comes down to one moment, Sviatopokrovskoye. If they manage to take this settlement and cut the last supply route, then the Ukrainian forces will face a choice. Either remain in Seversk, but thereby fall into encirclement, as happened in Mirnograd, or retreat from the city. But Sviatopokrovskoye is a very fortified position. It seems, you look at the map, the Russian army is very close. And what's the problem? And the problem is in the terrain relief. Now I'll demonstrate on another map, on a three-dimensional relief map. Here, see, the village is in a lowland, and on the heights correspondingly are the AFU positions. If you attack head-on, you end up in such a position where you're in a lowland, and from above they simply shoot you. That is, you're like in the palm of their hand, like in a shooting range, and there will be significant losses. Therefore, until the Russian army knocks them out from there, we won't take Sviatopokrovskoye. That is, the sequence is like this. First Sviatopokrovskoye, then the Russian army will take Seversk. That's approximately the situation here. Moving further, regarding Kostyantynivka, there's naturally no probability of taking the city in December. The city is large. This is the largest city that the Russian army is storming after Mariupol. But where probabilities exist, that's Mirnograd and Rodinskoye. And Pokrovsk, that's it. Pokrovsk came under Russian control, and yesterday evening this was officially announced. But actually Pokrovsk was taken earlier, approximately a week and a half ago. They were just finishing clearing the northern sector of the city. But now everything is completed. And it turns out that in December, and December has just begun, in December already two cities have come under Russian control, Pokrovsk and Volchansk. Regarding Mirnograd, here it's more complicated, but all logic indicates that within a month they should complete the operation. The Ukrainian forces have no more logistics here, and although they held out here in November, to hold out another month on supply only by drones through the air will be extremely difficult for them. Of course, it's not 100% chances, and not even 90%, that by the end of the month the Russian army will complete the operation in Mirnograd. About 60–65%, I think. Why not 100%? Well, because see how much was required for clearing Pokrovsk. About a month. Approximately a month was needed to completely clear Pokrovsk. Therefore, whether a month will be enough to clear Mirnograd, not a fact. But possibly it will be enough. The same regarding Rodinskoye. The city is small, but almost completely consists of multi-story buildings. And the Ukrainian forces are desperately fighting for it. And although there's progress, it's achieved very hard and not particularly fast. Therefore 50-50, whether the Russian army will complete it by the end of the year or not. And the last city where there's a probability of taking before the end of the month, this is Guliapol. Moreover, yesterday in a report to Putin, it was also announced that the operation to take the city has begun. I asked in the episode to remember the date. November 30th. November 30th. This is the start of the storm of Guliapol. And now street combat operations are unfolding there. Some bloggers have already written that now a week, and that's it. The fighters of the Vostok grouping will take the city. Well, no, of course. Yes, these units are moving very quickly and swiftly in their zone of responsibility, in their sectors. But here it's necessary to understand that it's one thing to move across open terrain and take small villages, and another thing to storm a fortified city. Completely different methodology of conducting combat operations and undoubtedly a completely different pace of advancement. Therefore, chances to complete the operation in Guliapol by the end of the month exist, but not particularly high. Personally, by my estimates, I give 40% that the city will be taken by the end of December, and correspondingly 60% that still the battles for the city will continue into January as well. Also today it was announced that two settlements, Dobropol and Zelenyi Gay, officially came under control of the Russian army. The Russian army is gradually approaching the city from the northern direction as well. The only settlement that remains to occupy is Varvarovka, and then all settlements up to the Gaichel River will be occupied from the eastern side. The Ukrainian defense here is built precisely along this river, and where the first breakthrough of it will be, I think we'll soon see. Total, 2 cities have already been announced under Russian control in December, and several more cities are on the way. And the probabilities that several more cities will come under Russian control by the end of the month, they are present. The armed forces of Russia established control over the village of Klinovoy, north of Chasov Yar. The settlement is located between the cities of Kostyantynivka and Kramatorsk. According to experts, the wedge that formed as a result of combat operations on this section of the front is intended to inflict serious damage to the logistics of the Ukrainian forces, as well as accelerate the liberation not only of Kostyantynivka, but also neighboring Druzhkovka and Dobropole. In addition, according to information from the Russian military department, defeats were inflicted on formations of 2 mechanized, an airmobile, an assault, a mountain assault brigades of the Ukrainian forces, and a marine infantry brigade in the areas of the settlements of Seversk, Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, Zakotnoye, Stepanovka, Reznikovka and Konstantinovka. As a result, the Ukrainian forces not only lost over 210 servicemen, but also lost 5 combat armored vehicles, including Stryker and M113 of American production, 4 artillery pieces, 2 electronic warfare stations, and 2 material storage facilities. Let's note that Klinovoye is a small village in the Kramatorsk district, with a pre-war population of only a few dozen people. Its significance lies in its location. It's 8 kilometers north from Konstantinovka and about 9 kilometers from Druzhkovka. In addition, nearby runs the Chasov Yar, Kramatorsk railway line. Klinovoye is a settlement located near the Seversky Donets, Donbass Canal in immediate proximity to the Kramatorsk, Druzhkovka, Konstantinovka highway. Actually, taking control of this village gives Russian troops the opportunity to more intensively strike the transport of the Ukrainian forces on the highway, says military correspondent Fyodor Gromov. According to him, this road is the key supply artery of the Ukrainian grouping in Konstantinovka. Thus, the front line is shaping up into a kind of horseshoe, which will provide the enemy with serious logistics problems, he continues. However, to talk about any rapid changes on this section of the front is premature for now. To begin with, Konstantinovka must be taken under control, and this is impossible until the issue of clearing Ukrainian units in the cauldron of the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration is resolved, the speaker believes. In the analyst's opinion, after taking Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, the Russian army will be able to advance toward Dobropol and Druzhkovka. This, in turn, will create another threat to Ukrainian rear areas and supply, and will also force the enemy to choose, either leave Konstantinovka or cut supplies to the units located there, Gromov emphasized. In turn, military correspondent Alexander Kots believes that The South grouping is trying to drive a wedge into the junction of the Ukrainian forces units defending neighboring Druzhkovka and Kostyantynivka. To isolate them from each other, it's necessary to cut Highway N20. Meanwhile, control over these cities will open the Russian army's path to Kramatorsk and Slavyansk from the south, he wrote. In Donbass remains a line of fortress cities stretching from Slavyansk through Kramatorsk, Druzhkovka and Kostyantynivka. We're talking about a strip of settlements transitioning into each other, connected by a road, added military analyst Mikhail Onufrienko. He also confirms that taking Klinovoy creates a serious threat for the Ukrainian forces in Kostyantynivka. The fact is that as we approach Druzhkovka, Highway N20, connecting the village and Kostyantynivka, will be under increasingly dense fire from the armed forces of Russia. With the deterioration of the Ukrainian forces' logistics, one should expect improvement of the situation for Russian assault troops, the interlocutor indicated, reminding that Russian forces are already on the outskirts of Kostyantynivka and don't intend to stop. But Russian fighters encounter very dense and well-fortified urban development. The fortress was created over 10 years. The Ukrainian forces rely on powerful defense and an extensive road network that exists in many Donetsk agglomerations. Moreover, in Kostyantynivka, there are 2 railway stations, around which a mass of structures have been preserved since Soviet times. Onufrienko clarified. In general, Kostyantynivka is a significantly more powerful and fortified area than, say, Chasov Yar, which was stormed for over a year, the speaker noted. However, a kind of horseshoe is taking shape around the settlement. One of the wedges from the Klinovoy side approaches Druzhkovka, another passes along Dobropole. Initially, it was assumed that the city would be enveloped from the west, from the Dobropol side, and from the east, from the Chasov Yar side. But since the battles in Pokrovsk and Mirnograd haven't concluded yet, the advance of Russian troops from the west was somewhat delayed. But from the east it's proceeding, and taking control of Klinovoye is a significant success in this direction, the analyst detailed. What's happening is also important in the context of Kramatorsk. As fortified areas of the fortress cities line are knocked out, the AFU garrison in Kramatorsk will also have a hard time. After all, if Druzhkovka falls, Kramatorsk will gradually be encircled, Onufrienko explained. However, the interlocutor makes a remark. Talking about this is premature for now. The primary task of the armed forces of Russia is to disrupt the logistics of the Kostyantynivka garrison of the Ukrainian forces. In the long term, many opportunities open up on this section. Everything will depend on what strategy the General Staff chooses: envelopment and liquidation of the entire fortified area, or breaking it up piece by piece, the speaker concluded.